All right, this was God, this is going to be her take. I think they spelled it wrong. I think it's supposed to be spelled HURT space ACHE. Pretty good joke, huh? Did you figure it out? On the Valuetainment Entertainment Network of podcasting and video, blah, 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 blah. Known for PBD Podcast, the Patrick Bet-David Podcast, the guys over there at Capitalist Daycare, where those guys sit in a bank vault and just be really Republican at each other. They have a new show starring former colleague, coworker, Anna Kasparian, Jillian Michaels. Anna Kasparian's the one that I used to work with, but Lindy Lee, Amy Dangerfield, and there's actually, so we're going to take look at a couple little sequences from the first two episodes. Jillian Michaels is kind of the driver. She's sort of the captain of the ship here.
Welcome to Her Take. This is Patrick Bet-David's brainchild. And
okay, already, I mean, are they going to start selling multi-level marketing insurance? Or as it was described when Sam Cedar was on, one of the guys called it insurance distribution. Patrick Bet-David.
I got this idea. I think we have a good idea. Listen, I gotta tell you something, okay? The men we already dominate, but now we need the female. Can we get some female conservatives?
So Patrick Bet-David had a brainchild. Fart child is probably a more appropriate term, but so she refers to her production process a little here that I thought was really interesting. That you've probably already heard this, but you'll hear.
And we're pretty excited, guys. I had ChatGPT write up a little description for you of what the show is going to be, and I already got in trouble with Lindy because I didn't use Grok. So the debate.
So she's got ChatGPT writing the show description that she's going to read. Wow. And Lindy Lee, this is the person there in red on the right. She's been making a lot of waves within this world in the griftertopia of the internet. That's a interesting way to mount a show. Launch, set off on a mission, debut. That's a better word. ChatGPT is writing up summaries. There's been this huge conversation on I've seen it on TikTok and spilling over into college students and high school students using AI to do all their work for them, and just the kind of way that their underdeveloped cognition is only going to be accelerated by use of AI, supplementing, if not replacing, people from reading books and writing things and sitting with thoughts and sitting with the discomfort of the creative process and all that stuff that we should be encouraging, and all the nutrients that are healthy for humans. Instead, we're poisoning ourselves with this AI shit. But clearly that's happened here too. Let's just rewind it 10 seconds.
And we're pretty excited, guys. I had ChatGPT write up a little description for you of what the show is going to be, and I already got in trouble with Lindy because I didn't use Grok. So the debates have already begun. But the bottom line is, you've got real conversations that happen here. Different voices collide, clash, and sometimes even connect. There are no scripts, except for this one.
There's no scripts? Except for the script that I'm reading that a robot language learning model, hopefully a super being someday that'll take over everybody's brain, wrote for me. The thing that makes up that is not a thing, that is a fake, false hallucination of a facsimile of humanity, told her to say there are no scripts. And she said, well, she couldn't help herself. I mean, but like, we do this with no scripts as she's reading a script from an AI.
So no echo chambers and just smart and spirited debates.
I mean, it's decent writing. That's decent ad copy. 10 seconds. We backed up 15 seconds.
Bottom line is, you've got real conversations that happen here. Different voices collide.
Real conversations, different voices collide.
Clash, and sometimes
collide, clash, and sometimes connect.
Even connect.
No scripts.
There are no scripts, except for this one.
There are no scripts, Ed 2009. There are no scripts. Put your hands up. Best Ed 2009 impression you'll see for a long time, I'm sure.
So no echo chambers and just smart and spirited debates. Ladies.
Good ad copy.
Please introduce yourselves briefly.
I'm Anna Kasparian. I'm the host and executive producer of the Young Turks. And
She helped Jank do union busting at TYT. Isn't that fun? Look in the description for a link to the documentary.
and I'm super excited to be here.
Jillian Michaels, I do lunges for a living, so I'll be contributing that later.
I wish I did lunges for a living. I'm trying to do deep squats because it's good for your hip mobility and your thighs.
Lindy Lee, I'm a political strategist who recently left the Democratic cult.
Awesome. I'm Amy Dangerfield. I've been working for Valuetainment for a couple of years now in the media distribution department.
Nice. All right. So that's the key. That's the crew. They'll probably introduce more characters as the season goes along. You know, maybe there'll be like a non-human humanoid who just wants to be like the rest of us. Perhaps some background red shirts will get zapped by ray guns and stuff. So from this episode, I clipped out this one. I sort of thought that this 4-clip thread that I made was gonna catch a little bit more Twitter attention. It failed miserably. That was a waste of a few hours. I don't know if it was a few hours, but you know, it was a waste of time to work on it. But they had this whole conversation. I think this was about 16 minutes in of that episode, where Lindy Lee, who just left the Democratic cult, says that the Great Replacement theory is valid. They are expressing explicitly Nazi ideology with this stuff, and then they have a conversation about it.
The Great Replacement theory that they call neo-Nazi ideology.
Okay, explain for everyone what that is.
So for those who aren't familiar, it's the idea that Democrats are letting in millions of people from like South America, Central America, like random parts of the world, Africa, whatever. And they want to bring them into these Democratic strongholds, and they're registering them as voters to create this permanent, illegitimate electoral majority. And when Tucker Carlson said this, when other people said, when Elon said it, they labeled him as Nazi, as Hitler.
Why would they do that?
I actually think it's happening.
I mean,
Right there. Actually, all the stuff that's super Nazi stuff, that is it. And by the way, I think there's people can quibble with that definition. That's an iteration of it. A lot of the stuff kind of takes on mutations of former versions or of current, you know, like the way the internet especially sort of fractures things. My understanding, and again, I haven't done a ton of research into this, so feel free to fact check it, but in the Charlottesville riots, we had those losers holding the tiki torches, the ones Donald Trump defended, or was he talking about the Nazis that killed Heather Heyer? I can't quite remember, but I think that was related. That was the night before. Am I wrong? I might. Anyway, they were screaming, they were chanting, "Jews will not replace us." They were saying that a bunch. You've seen clips of that. This fear that white people are being replaced or being outbred. This is also what underpins Elon Musk's bullshit about birth rates, and you'll hear it come up when right wingers and they're talking about, especially if they're referring to explicitly Nazi figures like Elon Musk. He hailed Hitler. Let's cut the bullshit. That's what he did. And he's also supported all sorts of far right movements all over the world. Not to mention his origins or his both his past, his present, and his future all indicate that. But that whole notion of birth rate to them. What they're saying is white babies. They're saying race supremacy. These are explicitly what they would say is neo-Nazi. I think someone could rightfully parse the application of some of these terms. I do think these words get thrown around with a little too much facility, let's just say. But we are absolutely in a rhyming era of what that was. And it's important to understand the historical foundations for why it's such a thing now emerging in America, and it's an international movement with strains of it showing up all over the place, and that it goes back past the Nazis themselves through American chattel slavery, through European colonialism, and all that sort of stuff. So she thinks it's but her description of it is that Democrats are motivated to incentivize illegal immigration and get brown people across the border from random countries, she says, in order to demographically change the nature of the country and create a majority using democracy. And so this is justification for racism, justification for cracking down on illegal immigration, and cracking down on democracy itself. Let's let them go on.
You look at the state, when you look at all of the states that Harris won by sweeping majority, pretty much all of those, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's all of them were states that don't mandate any type of voter ID. And I'm really happy that like the SAVE Act, all of these things it still needs to go through.
So voter ID would have saved America from the Democrats winning, because it would restrict who gets to vote. So this is an argument for voter ID. You have to show ID when you register. You have to have a valid, I'm not sure if it's precisely showing an ID, but we don't need voter ID. Voter ID is a right-wing project because they want to encumber voting. And also not everybody has IDs not everybody drives. Not everybody has a driver's license. Not everybody has exactly. You shouldn't have to produce an ID. It amounts to becoming a poll tax, which is illegal. You have to verify where you live. There's all sorts of reasons why you can't just vote anywhere you want. You still have, your name is still on the list of approved to vote. That's why they're constantly purging these lists. They're getting a hold of the machinery within the election systems. Like one of the most famous examples way back in deep history is in 2020, George W. Bush's Florida co-chair, the co-chair of his presidential campaign, was a woman named Katherine Harris, who I don't know where she's ended up these days. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she's dead, but who knows? Probably like hosting a show on Valuetainment for all I can tell. She was also the Secretary of State for Florida. So she was in charge of the election system in the state of Florida, which, as you recall, was a huge contentious thing that determined that George W. Bush became president, when it was actually, all the studies since have shown it should have been Al Gore. So she's harping on voter ID here as a reason. But also, the red to blue thing is what she says. Let me just back up slightly. I
believe it's all of them were states that don't mandate any type of voter ID. And I'm really happy that like the SAVE Act, all of these things it still needs to go through the Senate.
What's wrong with voter ID? I just don't understand what's wrong with voter ID.
That's an excellent question, and I see that completely. However, as far as I understand it, and everyone correct me if I'm wrong, there's absolutely no proof that illegals were voting.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy.
So as far as I know, the thing we're worried about isn't happening, right? But hold on, I'm going to transmogrify my ignorance into wisdom by pretending that asking questions is enough to convey the confidence I want, to convey the propaganda that I am hired and that I am a part of.
Theory.
Registering the message.
I'm open to evidence. I'd love to see the evidence.
Hold on. That's not what I meant.
I mean, like, she should have looked for evidence of the Young Turks' union origins before she put out a false story with Cenk about how the union started. I wish you would apply that same standard to that.
In the country and over the course of years, I'm not saying overnight they become citizens.
These immigrants tend to be far more socially conservative than the Democratic Party is. In fact, increasingly so.
I mean, a lot of them, yes, especially ones that are fleeing.
I mean, that's a pushback. Let's give her credit for it.
It is countries, however, but that's
they don't know
do you really think that's a sweeping majority, though? When
I do, actually. A lot of Latin American
when they come to Philadelphia, all the migrants that are being
very religious. They're all very religious.
But they don't know that. They think that they don't know that Democrat, like in their minds, they haven't been educated in the difference.
I think the Democratic Party they're the party of so-called do-gooders, and they want to feel good about themselves, and they want to feel like they're saving they want to believe that. I think that's really the motivating factor behind this, and more importantly.
Okay, next, I wasn't going to do all these, but Anna expresses skepticism, and basically says like, what this theory that you're professing is happening isn't because the Democrats don't have it in them to be this strategic. And I kind of understand the logic behind that statement. Doesn't acknowledge the racism or the kind of the Nazi ideology that she just started by agreeing with, describing it as neo-Nazi. So Anna pushes back, and this is about 2 minutes here.
And more importantly, as soon as Donald Trump went down that escalator and started talking about Mexican and immigrants,
rapists,
that triggered Democrats, and they wanted to brand themselves as the party that's going to protect immigrants from Donald Trump. That's really at the center of this. Like the idea that they're importing people so they can stay in power. I mean, obviously it hasn't worked out.
Not importing people, letting them in. They were going to come anyway, just letting them in. And Democrats realized, they spotted this as an amazing opportunity to solidify electoral gains.
Lindy, let me tell you something about
Trump won Latin American or Hispanic voters. Like he made gains in people of color and I think particularly in that group. But Anna pushes back at Lindy here a little.
Lindy, let me tell you something about Democrats, okay? And you should know this better
part
than
of leadership.
Hold
and
on.
I'm telling
As
you,
the quote unquote lefty of the group, Anna Kasparian is kind of the Democrat whisperer. So she does speak with a little bit more authority about the Democrats, and she's evolved her perspective recently, as you guys are all sure. I'm sure you're aware. She's unaligned, she now says.
Exactly, which is why you should know this better than anyone. The idea that they're thinking ahead and they're plotting and they're like the smart people who are like figuring out ways to stay in power forever is laughable.
It's a very obvious
They
thing
were
to do,
headed
by the way.
toward a freaking iceberg in the 2024 presidential election, and they were totally in the dark about
They're
it.
still
They're still in the dark about it.
But wait, hold on.
This is not a savvy party at all.
I just want to ask you guys one thing, though. Have you not seen the graph that shows what the turnout for voters in the 2020 election was like compared to all previous elections, compared even to the 2024 election as well? Because obviously people were more on
voters, right?
guard.
Millions more people voted.
Millions of more people voted. Do you think that just
Wait, hold on, let
millions
me
of more
clarify.
Americans?
So the argument
I don't know,
for a potentially, which I personally, I've seen no proof of it. However, the argument for a potentially rigged election in 2020, meaning Trump was robbed.
So hold on, I've seen no proof, but you're saying that the sun rotates around the disk. That's why it seems like it might be a sphere, but you're saying that there's an ice wall. Now I know there's no proof. I've never seen the proof, but so she's just she's validating by acting like the question itself proves the premise of some sort, even though she'll also say there's no proof. Instead of saying, this is really ridiculous. This is stupid.
By the way, he has not provided any evidence of that to this day.
Wait,
hold on. Is that okay? And you'll have your chance. Is that millions more people voted in 2020, which is what shifted the vote towards Biden?
That is a large part of it. That is a large part of it. There could have been other mechanisms through which they cheated, but that is definitely a large part of it. You look at even California.
Yeah, the election that they lost, they cheated at. So she talks about California here. This was the red to blue thing I was thinking of earlier when I was kind of trying to bring that memory up. And she worries about the caliber of people who might come across. I'm sure we would be hearing the exact same thing if these were Swedish and people from Finland and those Nordic countries where they're okay. The Boers flooding America from South African refugee boats kicked out of their ancestral lands where the colonialism had taken root so deep. They did make like a special immigration exception for white South African. Like this is so nuts. Anyway, so she goes on about California.
The last time California was a red state was before a legislation was enacted that basically said if you come from an asylum-seeking family, migrants, you will not be entitled to any aid unless this democratic bill passes. And since then, California has been a blue state.
So first of all, don't trust what she's saying. I didn't fact check it, but this is not an authoritative statement, whatever she's talking about. So keep in mind, we're watching people who are, explicitly devoted to a right-wing project. It might be. I'm not saying just to be clear.
And we are creating incentives within this country that are bringing people in who are coming in. I agree with you. There are a lot of immigrants who are hardworking people who are going to contribute so much to this society. Exactly. However, the incentives are wrong. And now they're bringing in people who, when they look at the two options, one party saying, we're going to kick you out, and one saying, we're going to give you a $10,000 card.
Who do you think they're going to benefit?
Did she say car? I couldn't understand. We're going to give you $10,000 comp, maybe? Because I think she's Australian.
Who do you think they're going to benefit?
Who are they going to vote for? And what is the caliber of people that are going to be attracted into the We're going to kick you out, and one saying, we're going to give you a $10,000 card.
Who do you think they're going to benefit?
Who are they going to vote for? And what is the caliber of people that are going to be attracted into the country when that is the main messaging?
I mean, hold that. I want to.
Just a bunch of freeloaders coming across the country to vote out Republicans who want to destroy them and kick them out. I'll be stunned if they, and I don't think they do, but I doubt they're going to end up at the way that immigration is used as a labor force, as it's used as a maintaining underprivileged, underpowered, underrepresented, precarious, far more than citizens are. And we're abused as citizens here as well. I doubt they're going to head in that direction. It's about upholding the anxieties of race supremacy that is the foundation of America's power structure, and especially the current, administration, no doubt, but even under Biden. But nevertheless, this is what they're doing. It's just pretty ugly shit.
We'll add to that and then let you answer.
Okay.
So then in continuing with that thought process, the argument is that in some states you can vote in local elections. In some places, if you're illegal, you can vote for a mayor or city councilman. Now, we all saw Obama come out and lobby for Karen Bass. I'm not saying where, I'm not sure where, but it is a thing in some states. If you're illegal, you can vote in city elections.
There are some instances, I think in New York City.
Keep going, though.
They potentially wanted to, and I don't know if this actually went through, allow legal residents who might not have full citizenship status to vote in.
Of all that, the closest they've come to, and to Anna's credit, she brought it up. Is that in New York, she thinks that they may have had some way for legal residents, like long-term visa holders, student visas, I don't know exactly the details, to maybe vote in local elections or something like that. After all this bullshit about this massive millions and millions of people changing votes, changing the entire composition of states, all these incentives. And she's like, well, maybe in one place there was a little bit of that. And I would be for more people having access to agency over their lives and over the societies in which they live, for sure.
Local elections.
Hang on, I'm gonna keep going.
Okay.
And then you don't need the voter ID, so everyone's saying, well, that's highly suspicious. Why not? Which is why not?
Okay, next one, final one for this, and then Anna basically says she just wants voter ID because she's tired of it and it's boring. It's annoying to her. And then Lindy brings up illegals, and they talk about the census.
I'm so sick of the voter ID debate. Let's just do the fucking voter ID and get I'm done debating it. It's so annoying.
It's not a debate. The argument
That's
is...
how you win an argument. It's annoying, you win. Defending the right of people to have access to their government through what little democratic agency we provide as a society, requiring them to pay a poll tax to show themselves. This basically is a version of show your papers. You prove who you are. And then they made it illegal for Hunter ID cards to be proof of ID. I'm saying this, I think it happened in Texas, but there's been proposals and all this stuff. But they, and all over the country too, I know that they're always fighting college students having the ability to vote because they tend to lean towards the Democrats. The fuckery with election machinery is so profoundly, it's common, but it's profoundly bad for the way we do it, the way we run this country. One of the few things the Democrats tried to do under Biden, which was stymied pretty quickly, and they did it I think it was HR 1. They put forward a comprehensive voter package to increase and strengthen funding for elections and expanding voter access, and it was shot down quickly. But to their credit, they tried that. I don't think they fought very hard for it, but we're still in some really scary. Not still, but we're in really dark, scary territory with access to the booth. There's some states, I want to say Georgia, but don't quote me, where it's illegal to give someone water who's standing in line to vote. You can't provide you can get, I don't know if it's fined or arrested. They probably would pull people out of line for providing them with water. Here, looks like you've been in line for 5 hours. Here's some water. Because that's one of the most common ways, besides the gerrymandering, which is absurd. But one of the most common ways they do it is just by reducing ballot access, meaning the places where there's large African American populations or heavily Democratic skewing type districts. They'll only allow one voting place, and then out in the rural areas or some other place they'll provide tons of them. So the wait times are way different. Standing in line to vote, and that's why they do it on Tuesday. Bosses can take time off more than workers. It's a disgusting thing. It should be a Saturday, Sunday. It should be 4 days of voting. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Or Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Or how about just Sunday? Even if it was just one day on the weekend. An election, for people who were able to show up, lots of people have to work on Sundays too. But it's just so fucking sick, man.
why people think they're gaming elections.
Yeah.
Why do it?
No, I know. Just do it.
It's so
There's one
hard.
more thing I want you to consider, only because I personally have a hard time contending with it. I'm also under the impression, and everyone correct me if I'm wrong, that you get more seats in Congress based on the size of your...
Ding, ding,
That is true.
That is
How many
true.
people- Okay, so then
Based on the
arguably,
census. Based on the census, yeah.
illegal or not, so you could technically make any president in power a lame duck if you control Congress, right? So that's the argument, although there's no proof
Jillian,
of it.
that is no, but Jillian, you have
Is that the third time she said, although there's no proof of it? I mean, to her credit, she says that at least.
about
proof,
that, 'cause
though.
okay,
you
go.
have the proof
Go.
because they are fighting so hard to commandeer the census and the way people are counted. You hit on a jackpot like unwittingly because these Democrats, they are trying so hard to make sure that illegals are counted in the census. Republicans are doing the exact
Illegals, first of all, no human being is illegal. I think that the phraseology itself is indicative of the problem that we're talking about. It's it's what creates calling them criminals. It's heading you down the road of justifying taking away due process and then sending them to torture prisons or torture camps, extermination camps in other countries, which we're starting to do. I hate that. I think it's disgusting there, but that's besides the point. The census is supposed to count all persons. It says persons. It doesn't say citizens. It's just a machinery thing. Like if you had a society and you had at least some notion of objective reality, it's important to count the people in the area within your borders. And that would include all people, not just those of a privileged status. In order, because it's what she says she's worried about is that by adding the count, which changes the way the congressional districts are then drawn up, and they're using this conspiratorial framework for it all, is a way to game the system to benefit one group over another. But exactly the thing she says is bad is what she's trying to impose by saying that we shouldn't be counting illegals, quote unquote, by leaving them out. And then, of course, we create these conditions where people avoid answering questions to the census takers and avoid even working for the census, thing. I know that Trump, I think, it's every 10 years. So you have to hire a bunch of people to go out around and talk to people. It's a pretty sloppy process. I'm not sure precisely. I'm sure there's more nuance to it. But this is the twisted part of this whole thing, is that the thing that she says is bad is precisely the thing that they're trying to do by only allowing a certain privileged group to be counted. Therefore, ensuring a certain way that the congressional districts are even drawn. And I'm not even sure if what they're worried about is correct. I think that's what the 3/5 compromise was in terms of the Constitution. Was they compromised by saying that they'll call black people, they'll count saying the word population sounds kind of gross, but so forgive me for that. But they'll count the black population, they'll count 100, but they'll only count 60. 3/5 of 100 is 60. But that would be so that the Southerners, or so where those people were living, although there was no representation from any black person in that time, and it took many, many, many decades before there would even be a single person, they would at least get that little boost because they got to count, but they weren't going to count all of them. Okay, we'll give you 60%. I think that's what it was. Sorry if I'm wrong about that.
because these Democrats, they are trying so hard to make sure that illegals are counted in the census. Republicans are doing the exact opposite. You see what I mean?
Yes, that's the problem. We should be counting every single person.
That's the tough part, and that's the part where I'm like, it does seem pretty friggin' conspiratorial.
There's Jillian Michaels. That's that thing where she goes like, yeah, I don't know, but I'm just going to pretend to be kind of dumb and ignorant and confused because it's probably true. But also I'm going to transmogrify this into common sense it feels very conclusive the way she sort of transmits that notion.
Why have all of these things? Come on in. If you open borders, just because we can't get a bipartisan bill, baloney. No ID. Why? Weird. Oh, here's all these incentives: free healthcare, interest-free loans,
free hotels,
free
cash.
Bizarre. And who's the party giving it away? The Democrats. And then, by the way, you get more seats in Congress. It is a little bit like, I get it's tin hat because
free hotels, free.
don't have hard proof of it. But there's a lot there.
There's a ton
And look,
of
it depends.
consequential
Like what we're
evidence.
talking about is state policy, not federal policy.
They're all coordinating. Alec
because
is
there is a
coordinating with the
federal
Fellow
ban.
Society. They're all
Hold on,
coordinating.
Lindy. Because there is a federal ban on public dollars going toward undocumented immigrants, but on a state level, yeah, you're
The
right.
new-
There's no ban on undocumented immigrant dollars going towards federal coffers. They pay taxes. They pay payroll taxes. They pay all sorts of stuff that they're Social Security, all sorts of crap that they're never going to get, while producing incredibly valuable and difficult labor, dangerous and risky, and wear and tear in their bodies. Food, like I talked about it on the HPAL number 3. That's one of my shows. One of my previous podcasts about the United Farm Workers Union leaders being targeted by Trump's Gestapo. Yeah, but it's just everything is so twisted here.
I'm giving away health care.
So I
didn't
agree
understand.
with you when it comes to states like California. Yes, it is incentivized to come into the country
okay.
illegally. I agree. Yes.
Okay,
So Anna doesn't necessarily completely uphold, I guess, the Great Replacement thing. She concludes that, yeah, well, there is incentives to come across the country illegally. And there you go. So that's the first episode. Let's jump over now to the next one. There's a lot more. People have been making videos about this whole thing too. So here's from the same intro. I just found this moment kind of funny.
welcome to Her Take, where real conversation happens. You've got differing points of view from all ends of the spectrum, right, center, left of center, somewhat. And we're
She's
always
pointing at Anna when she goes, left of center, somewhat. Like, in this bunch, probably. She's the Combs of Hannity and Combs. Old reference for y'all. But I just thought that it's like we've got different takes. This is really the spectrum of political analysis that you're about to see on this show, no doubt. Let's listen to that again here.
right, center, left of center, somewhat. And we're always looking for
Left of center, kind of, maybe not really. I mean, I can bet Anna might support a better universe, some sort of healthcare system, maybe. She's not pro-union the way she expresses because she helped Cenk do union busting. She might take issue with that, but I'd love it if she would someday address it. They spread a false lie, a false narrative about how the union started. You can see it in the description. There's I know you know that, but what a joke that this is like. Just, there's a center here. We're going to get all perspectives here. And guess what? They all happen to agree that Democrats are the problem and Republicans are the solution, even if maybe they can point out some of the things that they don't quite get, but they're not going to actually address the actual power structure. They're not going to actually talk about, capitalism and colonialism and all the bullshit, all the ways that the billionaires are harvesting our souls while destroying the planet.
common ground. Today, joining us is Elizabeth Pipko, former GOP spokesperson. Are you ready for this?
I'm so ready for
I
this.
believe you are ready.
Elizabeth Pipko is so ready, former GOP spokesperson. Former mouth of the Republicans here on our center-left show, even though we're hosted by former Democrat Lindy Lee, who is now like a raging right-wing conspiracy lunatic. Amy Dangerfield from the Mad Max, the movie setup. She's from Australia. Sorry. But she's Valuetainment, longtime employee. Jillian Michaels, who seems to has described herself as like a liberal. When she interviewed Cenk, they got into a lot of stuff. And so she might be a slightly more in that low information media celebrity, but who is also kind of just using some common sense about trans and about this. And gee, how come everything I seem to agree with lines up with the Republicans? That's kind of weird. And then you got the GOP spokesperson, and you have also Anna Kasparian, who genuinely is probably the most left of the bunch, but she has rejected lefties and made a part of her project is calling out the left and the far left. And Cenk has joined her in that project in a lot of ways. Her Substack is called Unaligned. She helped do union busting. She might be probably for maybe a more nuanced approach to progressive taxation, maybe a little more nuanced approach to universal health care or something like that. To give her some credit, she probably could express those things. I do think, I know Anna, like, and I've worked at, I've had lots of conversations with her, not that we got into like our political opinions over the years, but remember she hosted a show with Michael Brooks on Jacobin called Weekends. She and Michael were very close. Yeah. I also was friends with Michael. I met him at Jimmy Dore's garage. So there's a moment from this episode that I wanted to play related to, this is a quicker one. I'm not going to go deep on here, but they talked about Harris, and that, a lot of this episode, I kind of just skimmed through the first like 20 something minutes. Is about the Democrats. What are the Democrats doing wrong? And the Democrats do have a very contentious primary season coming up, assuming we're allowed to have elections again. And so it's a big topic of conversation. It's nothing wrong with right wing shows like this wanting to talk about that. I guess totally fair, obviously. But let's see where we start.
Cover up was absolutely hideous and disgusting, and then at the same time,
she's talking about covering up Biden's age and Biden's mental acuity. She does bring that up a lot, and it is true. The Democrats covered it up, and it's a disgusting part of the way the the Biden insisting on hanging on to power was catastrophic for where the world is right now. So here we get into the real point that I was going to get to.
Look, I hear what you're saying, Lindy. The idea that you should pick the vice president based on their skin color is unacceptable. Unacceptable under any context.
Okay, so Lindy had mentioned that Biden picked Kamala Harris because she's black, and I think he said that. I think he said something about how he's going to choose a black woman it's absurd that he put that out in the world. I do think that there's a case to be made for how it opens up this sort of criticism, but from all different quarters, it reduces her to an identity, and it might be good politics to make decisions. A lot of the ways they choose vice presidents, like it's bad politics for a president to choose a vice president from the same state. You're drawing from the same pool. You pick a guy, you pick your VP from a state that's important to your election, or a demographic group that's important to your election. So, like, I think it's a valid criticism. I think Biden, in his ancient, dementia-addled wisdom, which is not the right word. What's the opposite of wisdom? But his outdated, antiquated, old racist, old man bullshit might have been making a decent electoral decision. You could argue about strategy in terms of which demographic group was best for your VP, but verbalizing it publicly does seem to be a stupid thing to do for reasons I just kind of rambled about. But the thing I wanted to point out, though, is what Anna said. It might have gone right past you, and I'm asking you to think about this for a second. She says that it's absurd for skin color to matter in who is chosen to be vice president. What skin color is J.D. Vance? The answer is red, because he's a demon.
Cover up was absolutely hideous and disgusting. And then at the same time, look, I hear what you're saying, Lindy. The idea that you should pick the vice president based on their skin color is unacceptable. Unacceptable under
Now, was J.D. Vance chosen for his skin color? Would he have been picked if he were anything other than beige? Obviously. One of the things that goes around every time there's Republican, administrations are the photos of the interns and photos of the staff, and they do like group photos and stuff, or just catch various moments. It's a sea of whiteness. It's a sea of white faces. The identity politics of this country, of a race supremacy like America, is deeply ingrained into privileging whiteness, which is why what Anna said sounded like common sense.
Look, I hear what you're saying, Lindy. The idea that you should pick the vice president based on their skin color is unacceptable.
So I just wish you would say, and it's very clear that J.D. Vance was chosen because of his skin color. It's 100%. You're fooling yourself if you think that his skin color didn't play a major role in his choice. Plenty of options, and there's probably going to be a day in the future where we see a prominent Republican of color who is picked for their skin color. It's always going to be the case. Even if we start heading down the road of moving past this stuff, of this culture, of this cultural baggage, of this, horrible economic system, it's never going to just be flipped a switch overnight. I think we would be willing to accept positive changes faster than we are allowed to. But because look at the pace of negative change that we're forced to accept. We still deal with all that, but it's always a factor. So this whole notion that Democrats are the only ones that are doing identity politics is fucking horse shit. So give me a break. All right, so that's that for Hurt Ache.